Disney World, the Church of the Mouse, and I'm here as promised with my father. This is my father. You want to introduce yourself?
Robert Velardo, Branson's dad.
Uh huh.
Been
And
that since he was born.
it's true. And so we're here. We're talking about raising godly men. That's what I wanted to talk about today. And so I asked my dad if he would come on because I'm going to be with him the next 2 days. And I asked him if he would come on these next 2 days, today and tomorrow. I guess we'll see how today goes before we promise tomorrow. But anyway, today and tomorrow, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk about basically Bible principles for raising godly men. What the Bible requires to raise godly men. You know what I talked about yesterday, and the importance of that as you. So, well, yesterday I talked about the importance of having godly men within the church, right? And you see within America, there's so many churches that there's a lack of men in the church. So many churches are, not that there's anything wrong with having women in the church. You should just also have men in the church, right? And unfortunately, that's a lot of the times because of we talked about the way that different churches are run and that it's kind of geared towards a more feminine thing. And then we also talked about that there's just a lack of, fathers really to raise godly sons. And that's very important as it relates to raising godly sons and seeing people be impacted by the Lord in that way. So anyway, I wanted to hop on today. I wanted to share along those lines. As you're hopping on, I pray that this will be a blessing to you, especially those of you that have sons or have children, because I'm sure some of it will apply to daughters as well, although I wanted to focus it on sons. So with that in mind, we're just going to kind of tag team this, and what we're going to do is we're going to go back and forth, and I'll say a little bit, he'll say a little bit. We'll just go back and forth on that, and just go back and forth, and kind of got 5 points each, which I doubt that we'll get to. But anyway, I'll let my father go first and share his thoughts first. So, raising godly men, what's the key? What do you have to do to raise godly men?
Well, I think the first key has to do with who you're raising those godly men with. I think choosing your wife and choosing someone that you want to spend the rest of your time with, the rest of your life with, and someone that you want to have a family with is key. I'm blessed that I've got someone that is just phenomenal. She is just a godly woman. Julie, Branson's mother, is just incredibly just driven to be a person that God has called her to be, whether that's in the mission field of Kyrgyzstan or Kazakhstan or Ukraine or wherever she's been, or Brazil, or whether that's being a missionary in her work as a dentist and just bringing the light to others, and just being a person that will just bless others through what she does. So I think that's the first key, who you're going to do that with.
So, okay, that was good, because this is why I wanted to do it with you, because I never would have said that. So key number one, for raising godly men, is having a godly spouse to raise it with, which you often hear, because it's definitely more common. You see like a single mother trying to raise her child or something like that, than you have a single father or trying to do it by himself. But so if you think about having a godly spouse, I guess it could go both ways though, for men and for women, that you've got to have a godly spouse. But basically tell me, what do you look for in a spouse? What are you looking for in a spouse to make sure that you're with a godly spouse?
Well, I think number one, you're looking for a believer. I think that's the number one thing, that you're looking for someone that truly, has placed their life in the hands of Jesus, that has said, I've surrendered my life to him, and I'm going to be a person that lives mostly for him, that lives not mostly, but lives for him. And, that they've dedicated that's who they said. And that's not, that can't be taken lightly, and that's got to be something that is, really ingrained in them, that first and foremost, that's who they are. Some of you probably have seen the the movie Jesus Revolution, and there's just kind of that funny scene in there where I think it's I don't remember the character's name, but it's one of the main characters, and he looks at he's going to start dating his girlfriend, and he says to her, he looks at her, now, if you ever get between me and Jesus, it's over. And she just kind of looks at him and laughs, because she's a believer also, and probably even stronger than him at that point in their lives, and kind of looks at him and just kind of laughs, because it's kind of like, yeah, no kidding. Because that's what you want, is you want somebody that they put Christ first, and that's something that we've been able to do our entire lives. Is I remember very early on was we always said, and we're not perfect, we've gone through plenty of storms, but we always said that he had to be in the center.
Yeah, that's good. I think, first of all, that's probably the first movie reference that has ever been dropped on this broadcast, because obviously everybody knows how much I love movies. But anyway, no, I think that's good, obviously. So basically, key number one is finding a godly spouse, and that basically means that you have two people that are believers. The Bible calls that being unequally yoked, and you can't have two people that are unequally yoked. But what would you say to do, though, for somebody if they are married and their spouse isn't a believer? Maybe they didn't know that before they got married. Maybe whatever, they weren't a believer when they got married, and now they are a believer. So what do you say to somebody that's in a situation where they say, I'm trying to raise up my son, my daughter in the way of the Lord. I'm trying to raise them up in the faith. But right now, I feel like my spouse isn't supportive, or I feel like I'm trying to do it by myself because my spouse isn't at the same place in the faith that I am. What would you say to somebody like that? Great to have you on Nub's Revenge as well. I recognize you from last week. Go ahead.
I think number one, the first thing you've got to do is you absolutely have to put that to prayer, which means you're going to pray for that spouse, and you're going to continually just cry out to Jesus that person becomes a believer. I think that's number one, and number two, along with that is you model what being a believer means. And really what being a believer means is you've got this joy inside you that just can't be contained, and that no matter what comes, all the troubles and trials that come, because Jesus says we're going to face those things, you still just put your faith in him, and you show that to your spouse who maybe kind of maybe there's somebody that just they freak out a little bit about our financial issue or this health issue or whatever, and it's not that you just go, oh, well, Jesus has got it, but you truly put your faith in him and go, and I understand that, and this is tough, but I know that Jesus will come through for us, and you model that, and I think that's a model for the kids too. So all of a sudden the kids see that. You've got one spouse that's pretty very strong in the faith, and another one that's just they don't really understand it. I think that contrast will come through to the kids. With the kids, you don't flinch on that. You're a person that you take your kids to church. You become involved in the church, and find ways that maybe your spouse maybe they don't necessarily believe in going to church, but there's things that you do at church, or there's things that activities that you're involved in at church, groups that you're involved in, that they kind of piques their interest, and they love to be involved in those things. So, through that, I think you can build them up and bring them into the flock.
Yeah, I liked what you said, because I do think prayer is one for sure. In prayer, you have to have prayer as an element when you're trying to see like your spouse won over to the Lord, which obviously is going to be a major help with your kids. So prayer for sure is one. But I loved what you said there. And I think prayer is one, probably the most maybe obvious one, the one that people are the most familiar with. Pray for your spouse. That's like the standard advice. But what I loved was the second part of what you said, which was basically it's not just prayer. There's also a joy that you should have as a believer. And I think that's so important, because it's very easy when you have a couple that's unequally yoked, and one of them's a believer and one of them's not, or even one of them's a strong believer and the other one's kind of lukewarm, that it's basically a bunch of nagging from one end to the other. You need to be coming to church. You need to be doing this. You need to be doing that. Then the problem is that when you're constantly nagging, you're constantly telling people, then all of their experience with God, it's just negative. It's just everything is negative. Every interaction is negative. There's no positive association with God. Versus instead, there should be, the Bible talks about in Romans chapter 11, and this is the Apostle Paul talking about the Jewish people. And he said to the Gentiles, he said, you should provoke them to jealousy. In other words, people should look, he said that the Jewish people should look at Christians and be jealous and say, we need what they have because they have Jesus. And I think that's so good, because that should be the same way. If you're a spouse, if your spouse is not married or something like that, then they should be so jealous of the joy that you have, the peace that you have, the things that you have in jealous. Yeah, absolutely. Jealousy is derived from fear. Absolutely right. And they should be looking and saying, why don't I have that same joy? I wish I could have that same peace. I wish I could have that same thing. And the other thing I thought you said that was important is it's not, because there is a verse in Romans chapter 12. Let me read this to you here from Romans chapter 12 real quick, because I think this is an important verse as well. Because there is a balance to it, and you have to have both sides. And it says in Romans chapter 12, verse 15, rejoice with them that do rejoice, and weep with them that weep. Be of the same mind one towards another. Mind not high things, but condescend to men of low estate. Be not wise in your own conceits. So there is a balance there as well, because you want to have a joy. You want to have a peace. But you also don't want to be like living in your own world where you ignore the fact that other people are, maybe your spouse doesn't have joy, your spouse doesn't have peace. You don't want to be like, that's dumb that you're worried about that. You're dismissive, really, right? So you don't want to be dismissive, but you also want to have a peace that people can look to and say, why is it that for whatever reason you have this peace or you have this joy and I don't? And so that's something that you should have. So I think that's very good. Number one thing that you have to have in order to raise godly children is a godly spouse. If you don't have a godly spouse, then you're not going to be able to. Well, you still can, right?
Can, absolutely.
But it's going to be much harder, and I believe it's very hard. I believe to. Not that it's impossible, but I think it's very hard to live the way that God intended for you to live and not have your spouse be won over to the Lord. Because I think if you're doing all the things that you should, then generally speaking, I think that people will be won over to the Lord. And not that it's always the case, but I think generally speaking, you're going to be won over to the Lord. Anything else to add on that?
No, I think that's good. I think, again, that piece of when you don't have that godly spouse, that's not the end. It's just you've got to be that bearer of Jesus to that person.
Yeah.
And it can work, absolutely. I've seen many couples where that's taken place.
Yeah. Well, God does have a plan for our lives, Nub's Revenge, but you got to remember that just because God has a plan doesn't mean that everybody follows God's plan. And so I don't know that, there's a lot of people that may have an ungodly spouse, or just a spouse that's not Christian, right? But that doesn't mean that was necessarily God's plan for them. Although it is God's plan for you to stay married once you get married, but the Bible is very clear. Like, if you're a believer, don't be unequally yoked. And I like that he says unequally yoked, because that takes it a step further than don't be married to a non-Christian. It means if you're an on-fire Christian and somebody, well, yeah, they're a Christian, they just don't go to church. That's unequally yoked. So anyway, all right, let me give you my first thought. Go to 1 Corinthians is where I want to go. 1 Corinthians chapter 2. And I want to go based off something the Apostle Paul said which I thought was really powerful to the Corinthian church. One of my favorite verses in all the Bible. Here's what it says, 1 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 1. He says, "And I, brethren, when I came to you, came not with excellency of speech or of wisdom, declaring unto you the testimony of God. For I determined not to know anything among you save Jesus Christ and him crucified. And I was with you in weakness and in fear and in much trembling. And my speech and my preaching was not with enticing words of man's wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power." I think that, and this would be key number 2. Key number 1, have a godly spouse. Key number 2 to raising godly children is that you have to demonstrate the things that you're teaching your children. You have to demonstrate the things that you're teaching your children. So all of 1 Corinthians chapter 1 is the Apostle Paul saying, I want you to know that when I came to you and I preached the gospel to you, it wasn't with wise words. It wasn't like I came like some sort of philosopher, or I came with the most complex presentation, or I tried to win everybody over with this great logic. He's like, I didn't do that. God's given the gospel to simple people, and God uses simple vessels. But what he says is this. He says, I want you... Then he transitions, and as he goes into chapter 2, he says, all right, so I did it simply. I taught everything simply. But what I did was I made sure that my speech and my preaching was with the demonstration of the Spirit and of power. So in other words, he said, when I came to you and when I preached to you, I made sure everything I preached, I demonstrated it. Now, the Apostle Paul is really talking about the supernatural power of God. And that is important that your children see the supernatural power of God. But also, that same principle applies to everyday things. So you can't tell your children, well, this is how you should pray, and then your children never see you pray. You can't tell your children, well, you need to read the word, and your children never see you read the word. You can't do those things. You have to be demonstrating the things that you want to see your children do. You have to demonstrate those things. And so, and I think there's probably, I'm sure, not that I know of them, but there's probably, I'm sure, scientific studies, all sorts of behavioral studies that children learn more from what they see than from what they hear. I'm sure there's stuff like that. But I think it's so important that for children as they're being raised up, especially for sons, that sons have an example. The best example, I think, is a father, but then there's also other godly men that the Lord will place in their lives, but that they have people that they can look to and that they can say, that's an example of how I should conduct myself. That's an example of the way that I should live. So it's like what I was saying to you yesterday, which, I've really been meditating on it, but I think it's so important. You see, for example, and I thought the marriage example you brought up was a great example. The best way to make sure your kids have a godly marriage is to demonstrate this is what a godly marriage looks like. This is how a godly marriage should look. This is how you interact with your spouse. This is how you treat your spouse. This is how you conduct yourself around your spouse. This is how you pray for your spouse. These are all the things that a godly marriage should have. So there's that. But then the other thing is, for a son, right? You can have like both sides. You have sons who their father is completely passive, and they never see their father lead, and so it produces the same thing on the inside of them, and so they don't have the boldness to take a stand when necessary. And then you have sons that their father is so hard-headed and won't submit to anybody. They never see him submit to a pastor. They never see him submit to the local church, and they're just a law and order unto themselves. And as a law and order unto themselves, then it's like they never learn to submit, because there's times, even for men, where you have to submit, right? You have to listen to the people that are around you. You have to listen to the people that are over you, because God will place people over you. So anyway, that's for me would be number 2, is number one, have a godly marriage. Number two, that you demonstrate the things that you're preaching. That everything that you preach should be demonstrated. Go ahead. What would you like to add to that?
Yeah, so I think you're exactly right. It's that whole idea that and I can remember 40 years ago hearing that phrase. People won't necessarily believe what you say, but they're going to believe what you do, or they're not going to imitate what you say, but they're going to imitate what you do. It is about what you do and who you are. Now, words have power, and words are important, and speaking those words of truth and life, and the way of Jesus is important to speak into them. But really, it's showing them. And it's being on top of that in many different ways. Whether that's showing commitment in your own life to something, that maybe is a hard thing to follow through with that commitment, but you show that, or it's one of those things where you're just showing that in this family. As a father in this family, we're going to love each other. We're going to care for each other. We're going to, treat others the way we want to be treated, which was a thing I'd always say to the kids. So that's important. It is about what you do, not just what you say.
Yeah, you have to. And I will say, like one thing which I've shared this story with them many times about all the times that we would be driving home from football practice, and we would go through this whole thing about, here's the order of your priorities: God first, then your family, then school, then football. And I would always argue that football should be ahead of school, and I stand by that. But anyway, we would always go through that. But I think that message would be less. It would hit less. It would have less of an impact if I hadn't seen that demonstrated as well. If you weren't in church every Sunday, and instead you said, well, really it'd be better for me to go to football practice. I got to watch some film for this coming week. But every Sunday you were there in church, right? You were volunteering at the church. You were part of the church. You were involved at the church. And I think that's, that actually probably I would tack on as a side point. If you can be involved in church in some capacity, where you're serving in church, because it's one thing to say church is important, right? Then it's another thing to show up, and it's another thing to show up and to be involved in some sort of capacity. Where you were always a drummer for a while. You ventured out of that and went into a different capacity, but for the most part, you always were drumming or in some capacity involved in leadership at the church. So great to have you on, Kim, by the way. But anyway, I think it's so important that, especially for young men, that you're able to see. And thankfully for myself, I was able to see it in both my father and my mother, right? But for young men, that you're able to see your father involved in the church. When you see your father involved in the church, then it's like, okay, he doesn't just tell me church is important. On Sunday morning, you may be tired, but he's showing up. Yeah, please do like and subscribe. Absolutely, Kim. Number one supporter right there in the chat. We really appreciate it. But anyway, it's so important that you have that element as well, because it's great. You say church is important. You say to love God. You send your kids to a Christian school, but then their father, their mother doesn't show up at church and is never in church. And it's like, they don't see that. So you're saying that church is important, but what are they going to do when they get older? Well, my dad never really went to church. I don't really need to go to church. And before long, you go a couple generations. And I'll tell you, I've seen this in families. You go a couple generations, and grandpa was a minister, and granddaughter, grandson isn't even involved in the church. I mean, they don't even go to church. And so it's a very sad thing. I mean, that's what happens when you lose the fire, right? Is that you go, I mean, it just takes like one generation just like that. It'll change the thing completely. It's a sad thing that when you see it. But I can tell you, I've seen it. People are ministers in one generation, and then by the time you get to the grandkids, they know nothing of God. They know nothing of the faith, and it's not. I mean, obviously, every person at a certain age is responsible for their own decisions, but you can also help people. And you can help people by keeping them in church and by keeping them involved in the church. And it's something that, that makes me sad to see, that because you see people that gave their lives to the ministry, or they gave their lives to the Lord, and now their children, their grandchildren aren't even serving God. And so you've got to make sure that that you not only preach it to them, but you demonstrate it to them through their actions. And there is something about seeing, at 7 a.m., 8 a.m. on a Sunday, you see your parents go off to church because they've got to serve in the church, and then you're showing up at church when service starts. There is something about seeing that you understand the importance that that church takes. As we got older, there were times that on a Wednesday night, you would go straight from football practice to the church, serving in some capacity at the church, sure, drumming at the church, something like that. Which is why then when I'm my senior year was working at the church, I would get done at football practice. I'd go shower, and then I'd go straight to the church. And I was at that time helping with the youth ministry. So I'd help with the youth ministry at the church. I did that because, I saw obviously the example that most people, we just had a long practice. It's been a long day. I've got to go do my homework. But homework isn't that important, and God is very important. And he's a principal. My father's a principal, so he'll tell you homework doesn't really matter. Anyway, I'm just kidding. But then you place that importance. But it's all about what you see demonstrated, and what you see demonstrated is what you're gonna replicate. I'll say this as well for people that are maybe pastors, or pastors, which this could probably be a whole nother point, but the line between points at some point starts to blur, so that's no problem. Pastors that have children, I think one thing that's very important is the way that you talk about the church, the way that you talk about the people of the church. Maybe I'll just make this a separate point. I'll make this point 3, and then we'll go over to you for point 4. But I think the way that you talk about the church, the way that you talk about being involved in the church, the way you talk about the people of the church is very important. And that's one thing I've learned pastoring, being around other pastors, is sometimes I'm almost like taken aback by the way that people talk about the church, by the way pastors talk about the church, by the way that they talk about things at the church, serving God, that sort of thing. Thankfully, in this regard, obviously I had you as an example, but really Pastor Sean, when I think about Pastor Sean as an example, I served with him for like 7 years. And what happened was the way that he talked about the people of the church. I never heard him say anything negative about the people of the church. I mean, he never said anything negative about the people of the church. Everything he said about people of the church was positive. Even there's weird people in churches, right? You get weird people sometimes that show up. And even the weird people that would show up at the church, he didn't speak about them negatively. He didn't speak about them like hatefully. He never had any malice in his heart towards anybody that was a part of the church. He was always giving people the benefit of the doubt when it came to the church. And so that set the example, and that set the precedent for me. Other people I hear, our people are always gossip, or this person in the church, I don't know why they always do that. I don't know why they always act like that. I hear other pastors talk like that. And it's like, first of all, what's the example you're setting? Secondly, as a pastor, you have power in the words that you speak. You have power in the things that you say. Your words have power. And so you're just over here speaking death over your congregants. Same thing about serving God. And this is where it applies even if you're not, this stuff does apply even if you're not a pastor as well. But I never once heard Pastor Sean say, it's crazy that I'm up here drilling insulation into these metal beams and that there aren't other people that are helping. It's crazy that nobody else is helping clean the church when I'm over here cleaning the church. I never heard him talk like that. He never complained about the work of serving the Lord. And it was as if, which I know it wasn't just as if, it was true, that he loved to serve God. And because of that, it created in me a love for serving God. And so there was no resentment. There was no people. There was never a people owe us something as pastors. People don't realize everything we do as pastors. People don't realize everything pastors do. But that's not the attitude to have. A lot of people work thankless jobs. A lot of people work jobs where you don't get any. Nobody recognizes what you do. So I think that was another piece which is so important, and I don't know how to summarize that other than don't be a complainer, right? And I would say, obviously, I focus that on ministers and the way ministers talk about the ministry, but you could say the same thing about just anybody. So when you go home, do you complain about?
Let me interject. So I think what you're talking about here is, and I agree with you. Like BSB is incredible in that, and it's kind of funny because he calls himself this, but I think it was probably his mom who first started. That pathologically positive person. That's who he is, right?
Yeah.
And I think what we're really talking about is that you're looking at people and you're finding the value in each one of them, and that's a if anybody is a model for that, that's what Jesus did. Jesus found a value in every single person that he came across. He never looked at anyone and felt like they didn't have value, and that's what we're all called to do. So it's not just pastors, and it's not just whether it's a school administrator like I am, or whatever job you are. Everybody has value, and that's from the person that cleans the church or the school or whatever, to the person that is the superintendent of the school. Every one of those people, they've got something of value, and God's placed them in that position. Especially if they're following God's will, place them in that position, and they are there for a purpose, for a season, and for a time. And that's what we all have to do. And I think that's something that to raise godly men. I mean, I think that's something you have to model, is you always look at people and you go, this person has value and this person has value. Some of the best, go to the coaching piece, because both of us, obviously, football is a huge part of our lives, but that whole idea that that we find value in people. It's some of my favorite players that I've ever coached aren't necessarily the ones that were the starters or were the stars or were the running backs that were a lot of times it was that guy that, man, he struggled to really even play, and he didn't play a lot, but he was always committed. He was always there, and his value to the team was so integral because he just brought a piece to the team that others didn't, and he helped up the game for everybody because he was committed, and that kind of thing is just that's just huge. I can think of a specific player right now, Donald Thorpe, Donald Thorpe,
yeah,
who was he was a great young man, and I'm sure he's a great man to this day. And he really struggled to be a great football player. However, I will tell you, in one of the biggest games of that we had in one season, where I think the score ended up being like 52-50 against Aiken. He actually had the sack at the end of the game that won the game, because so my point though is because he just was a person of he was he's an integrity filled young man. He was a solid young man, but he absolutely that helps just the entire team, that lifts the entire team. And I think that's, again, you find value in everybody. Everybody has value. Every single person has value.
Yeah.
And that's an important piece.
Yep, absolutely. I think it was interesting. I was talking to Stephen, my cousin, yesterday, and I was asking him about, he said that he plays college soccer. And I was asking him about how the last season went. And he said that, the past 3 seasons, seasons 1 and 2, they made the playoffs. And last season, they didn't make the playoffs. I said, why do you think that was? He said, it wasn't that we weren't talented. He said, just the seniors weren't the same leaders that we've had the previous 2 years before. And so it's not even, a lot of times it's not even about talent. It's about, what can you bring to the table otherwise? You think about this. I want to say this as well, because some of you may say, well, I'm not really in a leadership position. I'm a lay person. Well, okay. So when you come home from church, what do you say about the people at the church? If you come home and all you're talking about is so-and-so, I can't believe they did this. I can't believe this person treated me that way. If everything you're saying is negative, then that's the association that children have with the church. Or you come home and you say, man, that was so powerful what God did at church today. Well, so do you choose when you come home to focus on the 2 things that the pastor said that you disagreed with? Or do you choose to focus on the what God is doing and how God is moving? And let me say this as well, because I think this is a good thought, or a good little nugget to meditate on. When you think about in the Hebrew, the word to glorify, the word glory means weight. You may have heard this before. The word glory means weight. So it's kavod in the Hebrew, and it means weight. It refers to weight. So when you talk about the glory of God, it's like the weightiness of his presence. But then you change that and you think about, what does it mean then to glorify? When we talk about glorifying God, well, it means to ascribe weight to. It means to place a weight or an importance on what God's doing. So if you come home and you're talking about, well, I didn't like these 2 things. Well, what you're doing is you're glorifying the devil. You're glorifying what the devil's doing. You're ascribing weight to the 2 parts of the service where you feel like God wasn't in those 2 parts. Or you come home and you talk, man, I loved this part of the service. I loved seeing this person at the church. Man, I love seeing what they do for the Lord. It's so, one thing that made me want to be a pastor was I saw the respect that my parents had for the pastor. I don't know that I ever heard them say anything negative about Pastor Bart Stever at Parkside Church. I don't know that I ever heard you guys say anything negative about Pastor Sean. Does that mean that you never had anything negative to say about him? Probably not. I'm sure that you probably did. But you weren't coming to me and saying, well, I can't believe he's doing this, or I can't believe he's doing that. It's always been positive. And it's not fake. It's just you choose what to focus on. You choose what to glorify. You choose where you're going to place the emphasis and the focus, and that ultimately becomes what you glorify. There's another pastor, and I'm blanking on his first name, but Pastor Ryan Justa. It's like a Dutch name. I don't even know if I pronounced it right. But anyway, he always says this. He says, complaining is the hallelujah of the devil. And I love that. Good morning, Ruth. It's great to have you on. He says complaining is the hallelujah of the devil. So you don't complain, because complaining glorifies the devil. It gives weight to what the devil's doing. It gives credit to what the devil's doing. Hey, I wanted to say thanks for your insight on my situation with remarriage. God's been working in my life lately, and I'm going to answer the call to share the gospel. Absolutely. Thank you, Sam. I appreciate that, man. It was great having you on the other day, and it's great to see you on again today. Anyway, so what you do is what is the thing that you're focusing on? What is the thing that you're glorifying before your children? You flip to the book of Deuteronomy. In the book of Deuteronomy chapter 6, I want to read you a verse here from Deuteronomy chapter 6 real quick. I think this is pretty cool. This is talking about, and this is right where Jesus says the greatest commandment. It's actually a continuation of the greatest commandment? Pacifism is a great question. I should actually do a whole broadcast on that. That's a great question. But I'm not going to talk about it right now because I'm trying to stay focused. If it was just me and not my father here as well, I'd probably just go off on a tangent on it. But I'm trying to stay focused, be disciplined. Deuteronomy chapter 6, Jesus says, greatest commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And here's what he says. He says after this in verse 6 of Deuteronomy 6, these words which I command you this day shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently or repeatedly unto your children. And you'll talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. And you will bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you'll write them upon the posts of your house and on your gates. In other words, that the word of God, what God's doing, what God feels is important, that's always at the top of your mind. And I've had something. That somebody said to me the other day. They said it's kind of annoying that whenever you're talking about something, you're always like, well, the Bible says, or well, God says, this is what Jesus said. They said it's kind of annoying that you do that all the time. And I realized, a big part of that, although now, it's a little bit easier for me to quote scripture because I've been in this thing for a while, but a lot of that was because, the way that my parents raised me, it was always the best painting ever. Yeah, as I said, we're at Walt Disney World at the Church of the Mouse. So anyway, the word is the guide, absolutely. And so what happened was, really when I was growing up, I realized that's because that's the way my parents were, is, in a situation where you're confronted with a difficult situation, what guidance, what teaching does the Bible have to offer? What does the Bible have to say about this situation? And that is ultimately, that gives you insight into how God views the situation and how you should view the situation. So the word should shape that view. But again, it's about what do you glorify? What is it that you're putting before yourself? The Bible says, meditate on these things. When you're sitting in your house, when you're in the way, you should constantly be, in the word, and you should constantly be repeating what the Bible has to say. Absolutely. Please like and subscribe, just like Kim said. Thank you, Kim. I appreciate that. I appreciate you putting that in the chat. That helps out a lot. Anyway, so that's number 3. We'll go over to you for number 4. What do you got? Or do you want to say anything else on what I said right there?
No, I think you're good with well, first of all, you took my number 2 on the whole church piece, because that without a doubt, to me, that's a key, is that you are involved in church, and I think you took that to the level that I think is important, is being involved in church, and don't discount whatever that involvement is. It can be anything. It can be, whether it's doing things with missions, whether it's doing.
But it's got to be service, right? It's got to be. You've got to. It's not just. You don't just show up. What are you doing? You're serving in some capacity.
Yeah. As Pastor Sean always talks about, going from the pew to the plow, right? From the pew, I'm sitting there and maybe I'm being fed, or maybe I'm listening to the word and that. But it's to the plow. What am I doing for the kingdom? And I think church offers so many opportunities for that. Whether it's serving locally, serving globally, whether it's serving locally, being like the person that takes care of putting the envelopes in the back of the chair every service. Every one of those things are so important. So that kind of leads me to what my next thing was.
Can I say one more thing before
Sure.
you do the next thing? Because I think such a good, that just brought back another memory, which was when I was, one thing that we used to do when I was younger, that Mom used to do with us. Well, 2 things. Number 1, we went on tons of mission trips. So as much as you're able to do that stuff, that opens, it broadens your horizons, because it's hard as a kid to complain about that. Now, we were very blessed even by American standards, right? But it's very hard as a kid to complain about things when you're going over to third world countries, or right after Hurricane Katrina, you're going down to help people from Hurricane Katrina that have lost everything, that are just living in shelters. It's hard to complain about. It gives you perspective. And that's super helpful. I remember even you said, well, we don't have money to go on these mission trips like that. Well, I remember one thing that mom used to do. She used to take us, I think it was every Wednesday. She would take us down to, there was, what do they call it? A food bank. And we would give out food to people that didn't have any food. And I remember, I became friends with those people. I started to know the people. And it was just, you meet people like that, and then you see, wow, there's people that really, first of all, there's people that really need the gospel. Secondly, God has been so good to me. And third, it creates a desire on the inside of you. What can I do to help people that are in this situation? What can I do? It places the heart of God on the inside of you, where I associate, the feeling that I have, the love that I have towards somebody that's lost, and I say, man, I want them to know Jesus. I remember that feeling from my childhood when on a Wednesday night we were out giving cans of soup to people. It's the same feeling. It's the same love for people.
Well, not just that, but you're the people that you meet that need Jesus. But what about those people that you met that had Jesus, that had him? They were not living the life that
That's
you
true.
were living. What a conviction that was for you to go, my goodness, this person, you see the joy in their heart and the joy of that who they are, and they're praising Jesus for the can of soup that you're giving
That's
them,
true.
right? And that's what all of a sudden your perspective just changes. So Nub's Revenge talked about, he served at Katrina also. He said he did.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And that's the thing is, one of the first mission trips we did as a family, we tried to do lots of things in the field as a family. Was we went to serve at Katrina. I think Katrina was in 2005, so you were 7-8 years old.
Yeah.
And you and your older brother and your younger sister got to serve and just do some things that you saw this devastation, but you were able to bring joy to people, laugh with people, and learn to play checkers with a guy, and all kinds of fun stuff that just brought joy to them and to you.
Yeah. Well, and you could throw the adoption in the same bucket,
Absolutely.
right? You could say that. I mean, that was like an everyday thing where obviously adopted Laura first, and the things that we just took for granted that were such a great blessing to her, right? And then with Logan, then it's just at another, it's at a whole nother level. Because Logan's my brother. For those of you that don't know or haven't heard, Logan's my brother who was born without arms or legs. So, but he's a great joy to be around, and it does something to you when you're around somebody like that, and he's just always happy. He's always joyful, and it's like, what's there left for me to complain about? Anyway, everybody, just so you know, on your comments, I'll go back through at the end. I'll read some of your comments and see what everybody had to say. But make sure you like and subscribe, as Kim said. Anyway, go ahead. Next thing, raising godly men. What's the next key? Go ahead and give it to us.
I think we're called to excellence. That's what we're called to do. And that's what the Bible is clear that we are to live above things, and we're to be called a people of excellence. And I think when you surround yourself with people that are of excellence, and they have the values, the biblical principles in those values, I think that's a key piece. Is some people let me go back. I was very blessed in my coaching career to be able to coach in several places where we either were nationally ranked, and this was both football and basketball. Long before I even was married, I was coaching at basketball tournaments, literally at the high school level, where we were playing the number one team in the nation and lost to them by 2 points, at the end of the game, that kind of thing. But it was because I was drawn to programs of excellence. I wanted to be a part of the top level programs. That being said, that's something that's ingrained in me, and I think that's something that God honestly ingrains in all of us. I think He wants us all to strive for excellence, and I think what you do is the way to get there. The best way to get there is you surround yourself with people that have that same vision. That I want to do things. It doesn't matter what I'm doing, even if I'm let's take the church piece, and I'm going to serve the the women's ministry, and they're going to have 20 people show up, and we're doing a luncheon for them at the church or whatever. Well, I'm going to make sure that that's the best luncheon that I can possibly do for them, and it's going to be the best situation for them, that they're going to come in and just be wowed by what we do, whether it's the presentation of things or whether it's the just the community and the relationship and the fellowship we're going to have with each other. It's calling yourself to do things excellent. And I'm sure you remember this before. When you served with Pastor Sean, and when we first started at the warehouse, they would put the giving envelopes on the chairs. Well, every envelope was placed on the chair exactly the same, right in the middle, placed exactly perfectly. Now, it was only going to last that way until the first person came in and sat down. I get that, but it was the idea of you want to do things right. And I think that's a key piece to raising being a godly family, is do things right, and not at the expense of treating each other the right way, but doing things the right way, and being a person of excellence.
Yeah, that's great. So real quickly, I'm going to answer this question, and then I'm going to build off that. But real quickly, as far as prerequisites before going on or serving or going on a mission trip, I would make sure you're saved, right? But beyond being saved, if you go on a mission trip with somebody that's like a strong, mature Christian, the thing is, that's a great opportunity for discipleship, okay? So if you go with the right person, I would say the only prerequisite is being saved, because the right person is not going to put you in the wrong position, right? So if you go with the right leader, they're not going to, oh, you got saved 3 weeks ago, we're going to throw you up to speak, right? So they're not going to do that, right? So I don't think that you have to have like a certain amount of credentials or something like that to be able to go on a mission trip or to be able to serve, right? You just don't, if you go with the right person, they're going to keep you in the right position, and they're going to keep you in a place where you don't get outside of where you should be for the maturity level that you have in the faith. So that's that.
And if you've got to drive to go on a mission trip, then you should go on a mission trip. That's God tugging at your heart, and He's got something planned for them or for you, and honestly, probably for both.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that I got saved 3 weeks ago, I'm going to go launch 6 churches in Asia, right? It doesn't mean that, but it means, you have a heart to go find somebody that's mature in the faith, partner with them, and then go, right? Anyway, so let me jump on what you were saying as far as excellence goes, because excellence, I 100% agree with you. I think that was something that was so important for me as a kid. I feel like that's one thing that you modeled so much for me. I remember, he coached football, and the thing is, when you think about coaching high school football, people don't necessarily associate that with that's not like a top level corporate career. That's not like a top level, you're not working for Goldman Sachs out there. You're not doing it's not like a super high paying job or something like that. But at the same time, I watched the way I would go to practices with you. I watched the way you worked at practices. I watched the way you watched film outside of practices. I watched the way that you took practices. Every practice, a schedule. This is what we're going to follow. This is what we're going to do at this given time. It wasn't just what you felt like. You treated that as if you were the president of the United States, scheduling out your day down to the minute. I mean, had stuff scheduled out. You would watch film like you were coaching, the New England Patriots trying to win a 3rd Super Bowl in a row. It was, we're going to watch film. We would have practice on Saturdays. Nobody practiced on Saturdays. No other high schools practiced on Saturdays. We'd come in Saturday morning after a Friday night game. We'd come in, we'd get in at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, exhausted, dragging out. But there was an excellence to the program. The program was going to be a great program from the top all the way down to the youth programs. everything was going to be great. Everything was going to be a great experience. Everything was, you treated your thing like it was the most important thing in the world. And that's what you're supposed to do. That's what the Bible calls you to do. Colossians 3:23, it came to me while you were, famous verse, it came to me while you were talking about it. And whatsoever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not unto men. If anybody coached football as to the Lord, you coach football as to the Lord. It didn't mean that now a lot of times you would preach to the kids, but it didn't mean every practice you're sharing the gospel with the kids. But every practice, it's at the highest level. It's you're doing it unto the Lord. Like God is counting on me to win this game. God is counting on me to win this season, which to a lot of people it seems like, well, that's silly. But it instilled in me as a child, this is how you do things. That's why for me, it's, I see a lot of people, and our family's really struggling financially. And, I don't know what to do. Well, I can tell you what to do. I watch my mom get up every day at 6 o'clock, go into work and work from 7 to 5 every day, 7 to 6:30 every day of the week. I watched that stuff. I watched you, get up early in the morning, take care of a bunch of stuff at the house, go work at football, and then get home 7 or 8 o'clock at night, working all day, taking everything very seriously. In the summers, 2-a-days, we leave the house at 5 in the morning, get back at like 9:30, 10 at night. It was a lot of fun. I loved that. But it taught me, it modeled to me excellence, and you pursue the thing. And what was cool was it wasn't ministry. It's almost like for me, it was better that it wasn't ministry, because I got to see you can treat whatever thing God has you in like it is a ministry, like it is service unto God, because it is service unto God. That's what the Bible says, is do it unto the Lord. And so you would treat that thing like, this is the most important thing that I could do. This is the most important thing. This is what God has for me, is God wants me to run this football practice right now and to run it as well as I possibly can. And obviously the Lord's brought great promotion in your life, now obviously serving as a principal, and he's, over the years moved you into various roles and all of that. But that's what was so cool for me, is I got to see you do that. And probably the best part of it for me, I think, was that I got to see you do that not just when you were a head coach, but when you were an assistant coach, and when it was somebody else's thing, and when it wasn't your own thing. And then you treated it like it was your own thing. When you were coaching with Dan, you were the offensive coordinator there at Highlands, and you were there, as much as he was, and watching film and putting in hours and working at it as much as he was, and being able to see you do that. Then when I was an intern for Pastor Sean, and it's like, how can I do the same thing? How can I, I look back and I'm like, man, I wish I could go back and do it again, because I feel like I could do it better now. But it does, it puts on the inside of you that same thing, where he's a principal at a private school right now. But anyway, it puts in you, but he coached at public schools and private schools, and worked at public schools and private schools. So he's done both, but at the moment he's a principal at a private school. Right. But anyway, so that was what, that example, that excellence, striving for excellence in everything you do, that did something on the inside of me, where you modeled that excellence. And I think that was a great point. I'm glad you brought that one up, because I wouldn't have thought of that one either. But modeling that excellence, that it instills something in and what you do sets the precedent for what's normal for your children. Right. So I don't think of it as abnormal to get up early, go to work every day, work hard at work every day, try and do things with excellence. I think of that as normal. But there's other people that I meet that they're always complaining about their job. I don't know that I ever heard you complain about your job. I don't think mom enjoys her job as a dentist very much. I don't know that I ever heard her complain about her job. I never heard you guys complain about that. So for me, work has never been something I've complained about. And for a lot of people, I think it's like the mainstream of their life is complaining about their job.
Well, and let me add a couple things. One, the whole idea, and I'm sure you've talked about this before. I think I've heard you preach about it, but just the whole idea that work is not a bad word. Mm-hmm. Work wasn't a part of the fall. Work was part of what we were placed here on the earth to do. And that's a good thing. And I agree with you 100%. And really, the whole idea that this person's job is more important than this person's job is more important than this, I truly do not believe in that at all. I think everybody has a job, everybody has a position that is very important. It doesn't matter who you are and what you do. Everybody's position, if you do it with excellence. So you know this very well because he was one of your uncles, one of your favorite uncles, I think. But not that the other uncles that might be listening aren't, but they're all. But I grew up, as you know, with 4 older brothers. So there were 5 of us, 5 boys. God bless my mother. Somehow she made it, but she's up there hanging with Jesus right now. But she, my brothers, one of them was he actually was probably one of the smartest men I've ever met. And he was really very, very smart. But due to making some bad decisions early in his life, he ended up, not being who I think he could have been. He could have been a CEO. He could have been all kinds of things. But what he ended up being was he ended up being a plumber. And the thing about him was, and I don't remember, I don't think you ever worked with him, but I know you saw him work at the house and that kind of stuff. I worked with him for several summers in a row when I was going to school and when I was coaching and that kind of stuff, just, because needed money. So that's what I was doing to help put myself through school. He was a person of excellence. Whenever he left a job, so we'd go in and do something in a bathroom. He did big jobs, small jobs. We'd go in and reseat a toilet or whatever. The bathroom would be cleaner when we left than it was when we got there. It would look beautiful. He took pride in what he did because he wanted to be a person of excellence. And I think that each one of us, it would be so cool if each one of us did that. And there's times that I didn't. He's singing praises to me, but there's times I didn't. I will say that, yes, when I was an assistant, it was always important to me to treat this like I was the head coach, because it was, okay, if I was the head coach, how would I want this assistant to do this? And I always tried to do that because that was very important to me, to be a person of character and excellence like that.
Yeah, and you talk about Uncle Dante, which I think, I didn't work with him, but we go golfing. And, the way you treat the golf course, the way you handle yourself out there, everything with excellence. And again, when you model those things for your kids, then that's what it produces, the same thing in them. Anyway, here's what I want to do. So we're going to wrap this up. We're going to be on tomorrow, 9:30, okay? Same time, 9:30 tomorrow. And we'll be on, we're going to be doing part 3 of this. I'm really part 2 of us together, okay? So it'll be the last time we're going to do this together tomorrow for this week. And then I'll probably do another week in the future where we'll do something together. But anyway, so tomorrow we're going to be at 9:30. Let me see if you have anything else to add, and then I'm going to go through these comments and read the comments and see if there's anything we can address real quick. But thank you everybody for being on. Make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't. We'll be on a few more minutes. But anything else you had to add before
No, I think this was great. I think the key that you talked about, just the Word of God. The Word of God's our guide, and God created the family. That was the first institution He created, and He created the father to be the head of the household. He created the woman to be his helpmate, and we are so much better when we follow the Word of God.
Absolutely. Let me read through these comments here as best as I can. Let's see what anybody says. I've never been on a mission trip. I felt called to go, but I feel called to go on a mission trip, Seth. Go on a mission trip. I think that's awesome. Awesome information this morning. Thank you, Kim. I appreciate it. Still remember the smell of Hurricane Katrina. Yeah.
Where did he say he was? I thought I saw Waveland at some point, because that's actually where we were.
Is that where we went?
We were
Been to Mexico twice in Katrina relief, as well as many other times to the States. I don't think he said where he was. Honestly, with all the things Disney has done, and also being a native, yeah. Well, Disney, Yeah, I'm not the biggest Disney fan, but
We understand.
I hear where you're coming from. Anyway, it doesn't mean will be instantly perfect, but we should strive to be. Absolutely. Strive for perfection. Perfection's the bar. We talked about the prerequisites. That was a good question. My question is, if we strive to be right, even if we think we're failing, what if we acknowledge we're falling short, but try to find answers seeking Jesus? How would God view that? No, God 100%, God honors the effort that you put forward. And just because you're doing something and you're not doing it perfectly, that doesn't mean God views it as a complete failure. God uses people. God understands that people are flawed vessels, and God likes to use people. And so you may feel like, well, man, Pastor Sean says it like this. He says there's only one type of person God can't use, and that's a quitter, right? And I love that, because the Bible says in Galatians chapter 6, it says, don't grow weary in well-doing, for in due season we'll reap if we faint not. So the key is that you keep at the thing.
I got one name for you, Peter.
Yeah.
Peter constantly. He's my model, because I love the fact that he failed, but he kept coming back, and I think that's you're exactly right. That's what we're called to do.
Yeah. All right. Let's see if there's anything else. I don't think there's all that much else. Fellowship of Christian Athletes is great. That's awesome. Very pro Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
We got that at our school.
The thing is, here's the thing, right? Nub's Revenge. I saw a couple of your questions, which I think are good questions, right? So you asked about this. So you asked about like the school system and, okay, was the intention of the school system right? And like, how does that work with your faith? Let me just say this. Here's what you have to understand. We're placed in a certain culture, and our job is to work within the culture. So there are a lot of things about the school system that I don't necessarily agree with. But does that mean that we just separate ourselves completely from it? No. There's a lot of things about the government that I disagree with. But I think we need godly Christian men and women in government who will infiltrate the government and change things, okay? So that's why I thank God for people, in education, godly people in education. That's what we need. Because otherwise, we just give it over to hell, and the devil and his demons have their way with it, and people, you don't raise up the people that you want to raise up. So are there flaws to the public school system? Absolutely. Are there flaws to different Christian schools? Probably. But the thing is, that's what we have to do. We work with imperfect people. So that's what we have to do. Anyway, that's how I feel about that. And great questions though. Movie Chariots of Fire is great to watch. That sounds awesome. All right. Anyway, that's pretty much all I've got. You got anything else?
No, we're good.
All right, cool. Well, thank you everybody for being on. It's been a lot of fun. Remember, 9:30 tomorrow. If you haven't already, make sure you like the broadcast, share the broadcast, do all that stuff to help us get the word out. And we love you, and we'll see you soon, okay? God bless you. See you at noon for noon prayer. God bless you. Bye-bye.